Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of the 455's Star Trek documentary, Chaos on the Bridge, which features especially the first two seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation. It's an incredible documentary, and right now with us, we have executive producer David Zappone joining us. We also have the assistant to the EP and head writer, Lolita Fatjo, joining us.
Hello.
Of the series, Ryan, of TNG, not of Chaos, right?
Very true. So Dave Zappone, executive producer of 455 Films, which created this and many other documentaries like the upcoming Voyager documentary, What We Left Behind, The Captains and the Captain's Close-Ups, For the Love of Spock.
We can announce Lolita, why don't you talk about what we're doing now?
Yes, we're actually doing a documentary now on the wonderful, famous Michael. I'm sorry, you guys. The doorbell. Can I pause that? Can I hit?
Yeah, sure.
It's going to get a plug-in for crying out loud. You edit this, right, Ryan?
Yeah, now.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, no,
I know.
we'll get into it.
I'm just so jealous that you guys got to see it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at the right time, too, I think, actually.
Yeah.
So
definitely for you guys.
For us, for me, it's the right time because of the timing of it. I'm glad that Ryan suggested this because it seems to be perfectly placed for where we are and where we're trying to go. And that's really where I'm going to start, getting into the questions, because what a great idea and just great execution,
Yeah,
well,
it was my idea 100%, but Bill, to his credit, boy, once he, I'll save it.
Yeah.
We'll save it, but another,
he dove into it, Cirroc. There was no BS there.
Tell.
Like when he spoke to Avery, when he has something he's interested in.
He's a very good conversationalist. He just knows how to extract stuff out of people. People let their guard down a little bit. He asks very direct questions. I mean, he should have his own podcast.
Yeah,
I'd like to watch his podcast.
Like he has a free minute.
Yeah, really.
As if he needs to do anything else. But but he's just naturally gifted at interviewing people and asking questions and talking. So that was another thing that just popped out.
You want to jump in, Ryan?
Yeah. Well, let's get back to. Since we're given stuff that's great for the recording, so we'll jump back in, and Lolita, you can just say what you're going to say about the documentary.
And so 455, we're currently in production right now on a documentary about the great Michael Westmore, famous makeup man, who of course worked on Star Trek for 17, 18 years. But his whole family history is amazing, goes back a century in Hollywood. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, there was a time in Hollywood where every major studio makeup department was run by a Westmore.
Right.
And I can leak one name. We've already got Sylvester Stallone in it.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, because Michael did Rocky and Rambo.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely have to cover that sometime soon as well. So let's just get into Chaos on the Bridge. For Cirroc and myself, it's perfect timing because we just finished season 2 of Star Trek The Next Generation. So we're jumping into this. And we've had so many questions about why did this happen? Why was this out of order? What's up with the writing? Everything's so weird and confusing. This documentary explains it. And Dave, can you explain to us where the genesis of this idea came from?
Well, the genesis was Bill and I had such a tremendous working relationship dating back to the Captains. So that started in 2010. So we do the Captains. I see, wow, Shatner is an incredible interview. And then we jump to Get a Life about the Star Trek conventions. Then we did 6 episodes spin-off of the Captains, including an hour on just Christopher Plummer and all the individual captains. So Bill and I had done a lot. And so I said, I was such a fan of Next Generation. Now he knows them and he had seen it, but he certainly was not a fan. And I just pitched it once in his office. He said, no, I've done enough Star Trek, forget it. And with Bill, I know you just don't give up. And then I got him in a really good mood when he was doing a horse competition at the Equestrian Center. I pitched it again without a hesitation and said, yeah, let's do it. And the whole concept was exactly what I think you guys have probably seen. Why the heck was the show so uneven the first 2 seasons, and then once you hit 3, you're off? So that was always our thesis. We wanted to answer that question, and we never intended, which we didn't, to go past season 3.
Well, first of all, I want to commend you because I think you did a great job of giving us a real overall view of what was happening from so many different angles and perspectives. You got the studio executives on one side, you've got the creative people on the other side, and really just so many people from Rick Berman, Maurice Hurley to John Pike, and all of these people that gave some great insight. And I thought DC Fontana, everybody really gave us some exceptional interview and insight into those first 2 seasons. And now, having watched those first 2 seasons, it was chaotic. I mean, you just see that,
Totally.
Denise Crosby just boom, she's gone all of a sudden. Then they bring in a new doctor, and then, their episodes don't seem to have continuity. There's some kind of, issues there where you're like, well, where did this come from? And so there's a lot of things that are actually visible on screen when you're watching this stuff. Why is the second season 22 episodes, for example, as opposed to the 26 that the first season was? So there were so many things and questions that I believe you answered for the audience. But I want to just go a little bit further into the first question, which was convincing William Shatner, because there was a little moment in this documentary where Ira asked William Shatner, like, he says, well, honestly, what did you think about it when you first heard that they were going to do this new Star Trek show? And I thought that was very telling because he felt a certain type of way about it. I think he used the word twinged. I twinged. Yeah. And and I think that would be anybody's response when they hear about something that they created. It's their baby, and then they're not part of the reboot of it. So was there some conversation there about his original twinging that you kind of felt like was a reason why he didn't want to do it initially?
No, I think it was really more that he really was a little burned out on Star Trek. And I think he was afraid that he just didn't know enough about the series. But Bill being Bill, once he dives into a topic, he is off. And I think where it really turned was, I think it was with John Pike, where Bill comes to the conclusion that it's a poker game, that poker is being played, and everybody is jockeying for power. And then we had our theme. And Cirroc, once he hit, and that's not me telling him, that's him. And then we ended up developing a whole even artistic motif and musical motif around that poker, that game of poker that was constantly being played. So I think the other thing that helped, our first round of interviews are the ones you see at JPL, Jet Propulsion Labs, where you could see all the Gene Roddenberry on the screens. They actually let us film in Mission Control for that. And Maury Hurley was the first interview. So Bill loves Maury because Maury produced Lolita, what was Tech War? Didn't Bill do a show? You might not remember.
Yeah,
anyway,
I can't think of the name, but they
worked together, so that he was like pulled in right away from Maury. And what I felt really good is then it rekindled their friendship. They hadn't seen each other in 20 years. And Maury started coming to Monday Night Football and watching, and they became friends again. And Lolita, you'll get a kick out of this. Maury was like, how tall was Maury? He had to be 6'2" when I knew him. And he would literally back me into the refrigerator at Bill's kitchen and get right in my face and say, how's the edit going? Where are you? The flop sweat, when this doesn't often happen to me, but more, and he wasn't trying to be mean. He was just an intimidating guy.
Yes, very much. But also he had the sweetest heart as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just a really nice man, but tough.
Yeah,
well,
I was
Lolita,
really happy to see a face on the name, because I so much involved with all of this stuff, and we always see Maurice Hurley's name, and I was just really happy to kind of get a sense of his personality and you know, his voice, actually, to hear how he thought and how he rationalized things. I thought that was another insight there. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
We were going to call the film, but the network wouldn't let us. We financed this through Canadian funding and HBO Canada. Bill wanted to call the whole film Wacky Doodle, which is what Maury calls the situation in the writer's room.
And the songs.
Yeah, and then the ending song, Steve Rankin, by the way, who you guys probably know, played on that.
Yeah, I noticed that. That was really interesting. And Lolita, Cirroc and I are watching this documentary with fresh eyes. We've never seen it before. Dave has just rewatched the documentary. He has seen it before, I'm guessing, since he produced the thing. You are watching it for the first time, and you've got that unique point of view of you lived it.
I did.
What did this feel like from somebody that actually lived behind the scenes and saw some of the bedlam? You experienced other bedlam that was not covered. What was just the overall experience of watching this?
Well, first of all, I thought I had seen it, and I don't think I ever saw it in full. And I was mesmerized last night. I wanted to watch it again. And so I watched it the first time, and then I fast forwarded and watched other pieces a second or third time. It just made me feel so great to go back that many years and see those people, especially Maurice Hurley and a lot of them. And because I was hired during the chaos of going from that first season to the second season, coming out of the writer's strike and going into production. And it was crazy. And the whole Leonard Maislich thing was
I was going to ask you, did you see this man?
Oh, absolutely. Creeping around all the time. And, you know, we have to stay sometimes late at night because of scripts that were always late, as usual. And he would always be like there creeping around. And I found it very interesting. Dave, I remember you saying you could never find a picture of him. We never saw.
I actually have a story on that. We did find one photo, and I contacted his son, who's an attorney, and he said to Bill and I called him. I forget his first name. And he said, yes, you can use the picture as long as there is nothing negative about my father in the film. So Bill and I said, well, the picture.
I got that. Really
all right.
But
there really aren't any pictures. And Eddie Milkis either we couldn't, which was surprising, because Eddie was in post-production going back to like Odd Couple and Happy Days, but we could not find a picture of Eddie Milkis.
Yeah, but for me, it was really a trip down memory lane, first of all. Yeah. And, you know, Gene was chaotic, and he was wackadoodle and everything, but his heart, again, was just in such a great place most of the time. So for me, it was a really great trip down memory lane, but every single thing that everybody said was true. That place was a nut house. I mean, and I could tell stories, but that'll take time.
Well, yeah, I wanted you to attest to some of this stuff, because they talked about, you know, having scripts and production meetings and ready to go, and then like boom, 3 or 4 days before you're about to shoot, he rips up the whole thing, says start from scratch. So that must be like crazy.
And the revolving door, that billboard that Ron Moore had in his toilet in his bathroom, that thing was fantastic, because there was probably a good 30 people that went through that door in those first 2 years. It was crazy. It was crazy. And the writing staff was not cohesive at all. We had Bert Armis there, the Skin of Evil, who killed Tasha Yar. Bert was a cop. You know, Kojak was based on Bert Armis. The reason Bert was brought in was because he and Maury Hurley had this long history of working together on cop shows. Bert didn't really belong there, but he was talented enough. And just all these people coming and going. And I saw that on one of the pictures, that gal named Sherry Goodhart's was on staff with Ira and Ron and Snodgrass. I haven't thought of her in years. I wonder what happened to her. But she was there during that chaos and probably one of those revolving doors out. But yeah, it was until Michael Piller and Jerry Taylor came. It was definitely what you captured in this film. Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I thought it was riveting. I really enjoyed every moment of this documentary, David. So I want to congratulate you on just putting together. And also, when you're doing something like this, and you get these interviews, and Shatner says, "Oh, that's like poker," and he kind of asks John Pike about, "Hey, you were playing poker in that situation." Then you go back and you start to come up with the idea of doing the animation and kind of visualizing these things. So the story, you don't know what you're going to get until you get it, and then you kind of reverse on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true with any documentary. All you can have is your thesis, your what you think your through line will be. I mean, again, look at what happened when we went for the captains to Avery's. Would you in a million years think Bill Shatner and Avery Brooks would be sitting and singing at a piano? No way. No way. So you can't predict that. But one interesting thing I'll tell you, which I think I've revealed before, is, Patrick Stewart turned us down initially. He did not want to do the film. He politely said to Bill, "I'm just not interested." And then Bill and I were in New York City, and Patrick was appearing on Broadway in New York City. We had gone to see like a Howard Stern or something. And he called Patrick again and told Patrick what John Pike said about it.
Nice.
The whole story where he showed up at the commissary in uniform, and Patrick said, "All right, that's it. I do want to rebut. And I'll give you 5 minutes." And so Bill couldn't do it, so I had to do it. So I did that interview. Patrick and I, we were friendly from the captains. He said, "I could give you 5 minutes, David. Ian McKellen and I are about to open next door on Broadway." It's like 6:05. We talked for 45 minutes, and I had to stop him and said, "Patrick, you're going to miss your curtain." And he's such a gentleman. He brought me over to the box office and got me tickets for the show.
Wow.
That's Patrick. But Joe can speak more when we speak with Joe, the editor. So we had basically the film put together. And at the 11th hour, we get this great Patrick Stewart interview. So everything changes.
Yeah, that's the beauty of documentaries, though.
Yeah.
I've learned over the last few years, which I knew nothing about, obviously, until Dave graciously brought me on board. But yeah, it's fascinating. You just don't know what you're going to get from somebody in a sitting.
They take a life of their own.
Absolutely.
You follow
Patrick answered every question I had. Mm-hmm. And I never looked at my list. We just connected.
Dave, Wow.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say, Dave, was there one that got away? I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people you would have liked to have interviewed, but that you couldn't. But is there one or maybe two that above all you said, "I just wish I could have explored that angle a little bit more with this particular person"?
Ironically, Lucy Salhaney, who was the genius, the woman that came up with the idea at Paramount to do the syndication, we couldn't find her, but we found her for Voyager, and she's in Voyager. And it would have been great to get like a little more of Dorn and Spiner, but they really don't do documentaries. So I think we had enough of the cast. I think a real get was Diana Muldaur. Mm-hmm. We got really lucky with her. Denise was terrific. We have Frakes, we have Sir Patrick, we have Michael, we have Gates. So we did okay.
I think obviously who's missing, but there's nothing to have been done. It would have been great to have Michael Piller to
absolutely.
Because he came in when it was still chaos, but he tied a bow and it went from there.
And again, not to plug another one of our documentaries, but in Voyager we have Sean Piller, his son, and Sandra Piller, his widow,
and Jerry Taylor as well. Yep. Her presence was a little missed, but it certainly didn't hurt this documentary. It was wonderful. Really, it gave me chills last night watching it. I was so impressed. And I love the animation. Just fantastic.
Joe will talk about that. But the other thing is that what really frustrated Bill and I, and Joe, as an editor, Canada they would not let us make this a full-length documentary. It's 58 minutes, I think, is total. We had to squeeze so much in. The one complaint we do get is that it hits too fast because there's so much packed in. We had more than enough for a 90-minute documentary. And that's the beauty of the Captain's Collection, which I'll plug, which is all of my Shatner docs, including Chaos, including the full Patrick Stewart, the full Maury Hurley interview. Essentially, every documentary I named on one Blu-ray box set. It's available on Amazon and Shout Factory. So I highly recommend that because I think Joe and I put the feature of Chaos is almost an hour. We put about another 90 minutes of behind the scenes.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah. There was so much stuff in this documentary. The fact that you got Katzenberg and Les Moonves, I really thought those were also great at, source information, direct source information from the top guys.
Cirroc, we got those in a day. Bill and I, we went to DreamWorks first and then over to CBS Radford for Les Moonves. And Les notoriously allegedly was not much of a Star Trek fan. So that's why you don't really see very much of him. But was great.
Yeah. And you got him. And I learned so much from
That's all Bill. That's not me. That's Bill.
It's the collective effort of all of you guys determined to make this thing happen. And I thought that you guys really hit the nail on the head. There was so much stuff that flew by. The Patrick Stewart audition with the toupee, I thought was it was gold. And to hear some of the other people that they were considering, the Mitch Ryan, Roy Fiennes, Yaphet Kotto, this is also gemstones, this information. I mean, you could just have a whole extra segment just on that alone. Also, I thought it was great to hear about Lucy Salhaney and how her creativity coming up with the first run syndication type hybrid show was instrumental in making this whole thing happen. So that's very clever on her part. And I also thought it was fantastic to know that, again, a woman named Lucy saves the Star Trek franchise.
Yeah,
so this is twice now.
Yes, it's a story.
Cirroc, you owe her a little bit too. I think you know a little bit about first run syndication.
I do. So shout out to Lucy Salhaney. I love Lucy in my notes here. But there's just the extra information about Gene's mindset. You mentioned Isaac Asimov came up in here, and the whole humanistic type of movement that was created behind that, and just a little insight onto the ideals that Gene was really sticking towards, and also the evolution of him as a person from being more of the playboy, getting all the girls type, mindset that he had in his younger age, and then more this kind of, more like Picard in this cerebral type of, standing for principle. And I really like the evolution there that was talked about as well. So I just felt like this gave me so much. The Susan Sackett information. I mean, the Captain Hornblower novel.
That was
suggestion
cool
to read that book. I just thought you gave us a million things, and this was fantastic and well done.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you
I
so
also
much.
like the fact that you didn't shy away from when Susan was talking about and Richard Arnold was talking about Gene's drinking and drug use. That you put it out there because we all knew it was going on there, but the public didn't necessarily know that. So I was glad that you didn't shy away from talking about that. Because,
but I hope what came through, and this was my struggle in the editing room, and Joe will talk about it, is trying to balance. I did not want to vilify Gene Roddenberry in any way.
Of course
whatsoever.
not, but you didn't.
Yeah, so that's what we really were very conscious. And that's why the Patrick interviews helped so much too, is because he really liked Gene. Yeah. And that comes through. So yeah, I did not want this to be, let's trash. If it
like a tell-all about his life.
If it weren't for Gene, I wouldn't have a career.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, we all owe a debt of gratitude to Gene. I mean,
yeah,
all of us. So I definitely, with certain kinds of genius comes like a certain kind of, not normal behavior, I would say. And some,
Madness.
yeah,
Genius.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he was sticking to his guns about certain principles that he thought defined this utopian future. Based on these certain set of principles, which I feel like he did accomplish, and that becomes the underlying legacy of what Star Trek really means, is this idea of this future in which we're all trying to um, coexist, explore, and uplift um, life forms that we interact with. So I really thought this was just so much information, and I wanted to say also, or back to your point about Michael Piller, I didn't realize how instrumental Michael Piller was to being, let's say, the calm on the bridge. Um, and also this gave me a lot more insight into the roles that Rick Berman played um, during those times as well, kind of trying to mediate and manage so many, egos, because it seemed like, there was ego on the side of the studios, there was ego on the side of the production, there was a lot of egos going around. And Maurice Hurley comes off of Miami Vice, which is not like a small show, it's like,
And
so,
the Equalizer. Both
and the Equalizer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is like everybody's coming with a certain level of cachet and and their own background and experience, and it may not directly translate into Star Trek, which Gene has authority over, but still they have great ideas. They are skilled at writing. They have these their own personal background and experience. And I mean, Lolita, when you're in the middle of this this storm as it was going around you, was there a sense that it would eventually calm down and that the dust would settle soon, or did it feel like on edge all the time?
It was on edge all the time. And as great of a man as Maury was and as talented, that chaos wasn't going to go away until he left. There were too many egos involved and too many power struggles, and just not anybody truly at that point running the writing room. The heart building was in chaos. And it really wasn't until Michael Piller came that there was this, literally you could feel this kind of calming thing coming. Now you have to remember, Maury Hurley left, then another guy named Michael Wagner came, which wasn't mentioned in this film, which is fine, but he lasted all of 6 weeks, I think, maybe.
We didn't mention him. We mentioned him, but not by name. You're right.
Oh, okay. And then when Michael Piller came, and then he started bringing in some of these kids.
And Ira, right? Because Ira was really was in the room.
Absolutely. Yeah. Michael came in above Ira, but thank God Ira was there. And then once Richard Manning and Hans Beimler and the young Ron Moore came in, things started to kind of go, oh, you could feel it. And it wasn't as chaotic. Where's that script coming from? What's scene 4 going to be? And blah, 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 And you also have to remember at this time, the writers were not using computers, which made this whole chaotic thing even more insane. So Ira Bear would give me a long legal yellow pad of chicken scratch as a script. And that's initially what I was hired as, to do that initially. It didn't last long. And finally, they got the writers on to computers. But yeah, so there was just a lot of chaos. And that whole thing I thought was fascinating watching, because by the time I got there in the second season, David Gerald was gone, DC was gone. But I knew about all of that, of course. But for me to hear their stories last night again, which I've heard over the years, was really interesting. And they must have just felt so screwed, really, and
it's really important, everybody at home, for you to know where you can find this documentary. You can get it at shoutfactory.com. They've got a ton of great stuff, including more content that Dave and 455 Films have created. Or you can just go check it out at Amazon.com. You may have heard of that one as well. It's available right here. It's an amazing collection. It's got tons of extended footage and extended interviews. It's got way more. Get it, because by the way, it makes a great gift. You can get it for anybody that you care about or want to convince them that you care about them, or you can get it for yourself because you care about yourself and you've earned it. But we're going to take a super quick break, everybody, and we will be right back with way more coverage of this documentary and the first 2 seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
And our coverage of the glorious 455 Films documentary, Chaos on the Bridge. Melissa Longo is here, everybody.
Hello.
We are also joined by our executive producer, to know him is to love him, Jason Okun. So this is going to be really cool. I can't tell you, Jason, how many times I thought of you when watching this documentary, because I'm like, oh, that's a Jason moment. That's a Jason moment. Because a lot of times you're throwing knowledge about these people that I've never heard their names, but you say it so matter-of-factly that I'm like, I feel like I should know these people's names, but now I do. Was this your first time watching this documentary? And if so, what was your just initial impression of it? Did you dive in like, oh, this is my kind of documentary?
Well, in some ways, I've seen it years ago. I haven't seen it in many years until earlier today, and I think at some level, like any documentary, it does sort of touch the surface, and you do get a lot of more honest opinions than you would otherwise, and maybe they're not as honest as they could have been or should have been, frankly, but you do hear a lot more than you do otherwise. And you certainly do get a feel for a lot of the players involved. And it's very interesting to see that what's lurking beneath the surface, where you have not just the writers themselves, but certainly, I think Leonard Maislish is one of the more hidden players in all of this, and there's certainly a lot more to it. And to be perfectly honest, I was a little surprised that David Gerald actually even wanted to be a part of this, just because of how slighted I think he was. From what I understand, he may have written pretty much the Bible for Next Gen, and he was basically pushed out. And he certainly, at least as far as I know, has been pretty bitter about it, and he wouldn't really talk all that much about it. And it's interesting that he participated in this. I mean, I guess this was done about 10 years ago. Yeah. So things may have changed over time. People do change their opinions, but it was certainly a little refreshing to see this. And again, a lot happened in those two and a half years. It's hard to fit that in an hour's documentary, but it really is. I mean, if you don't know that much about what happened, I think it's sort of a good gateway type of thing to kind of see and understand how exactly Next Gen came to be and why perhaps the first 2 years weren't exactly the same as the next 5, and why the show took a little while longer maybe than it should have to find its footing.
Yeah. Another thing that kind of jumped out at me, though, was that because there was so much inconsistency kind of behind the scenes with the writers, it made me kind of re-examine how the directors approached each episode, because there must have been, I mean, if there's no consistency on the writer side, then it's hard to give instructions to the directors. And it actually gave me kind of more of appreciation for how Rob Bowman was able to, string together a consistent kind of through line in his perception of what was going on.
No, that's a very good point, and interesting enough, because so many cooks being there in the kitchen, who exactly was in the prep meetings, who was giving any sort of guidance to these directors as to what to do, especially at the very beginning. It's a very good point, and to see you can certainly if you watch the episodes, you can see some directors sort of getting a lot more out of everything that they were given because they were pretty much in the same footing everybody was. But if you look at the episodes, some are obviously looking much better than others, and it's frankly a credit to Rob Bowman among them to be able to do something with what they had.
Jason, favorite directors of the first two seasons?
Probably Rob Bowman is the one that who stands out the most to me. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a pity that he basically didn't really do anything much afterwards. I don't remember exactly when he stopped working on Next Gen, but some others came in, but he certainly stands out in my mind.
Now, Melissa, this is, I believe, the first time you've seen this documentary, like myself, like Cirroc. What was your overall impression upon viewing it? Were you thinking, this documentary is pretty chill?
It was pretty eye-opening. It was, because I was not aware of a lot of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes, and I didn't realize just how much chaos there was. And it's interesting to see each person's interview and each person's take and perspective, because I think a lot of productions you don't really get to see what goes into making something happen, and everyone has their own ideas and everyone has their own egos that they're fighting with, and everyone has their own life experiences that are driving them to do one thing versus another thing. And I think it's interesting that this documentary touches on that a lot. And maybe not diving as deep into the questions, but certainly how the interviewees respond to the questions that they are being asked. The differences between John Pike's, I believe that's his name, John Pike's recollection of his dealings with Patrick Stewart versus Patrick Stewart's recollections of him dealing with that. And I think that has a lot to say, as take people's perspectives with a grain of salt, because the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's probably somewhere in that gray area. Mm-hmm. So it was eye-opening. I liked it. I enjoyed it.
One of the takeaways that kind of shocked me was this kind of chess game that John Pike was playing with Gene Roddenberry in the beginning of this, this whole I need a 2-hour pilot versus a 1-hour pilot. And this whole kind of, chess game about, what one person wants, what the other person wants. But particularly with the fact where John Pike had positioned himself into a corner where he couldn't really give notes on Encounter and Farpoint because he was stuck with whatever he would get because he demanded that it be a 2 hours.
Yeah, that was nuts.
And so I thought that was an interesting position to be in, where the thing that you're asking for now you cannot critique because you've forced the other guy's hand. So do you think that that helped or hurt the final result of what we did see in the pilot episode?
That's a stumper.
You can look at it two different ways. I mean, if you look at the pilot, certainly it seems like two different stories being kind of strung together. I mean, the original story that DC Fontana came up with is interesting, but I'm not sure. It certainly introduces the crew, but I'm not sure it's that capturing of a story, and we would have lost Q had it not happened. So
totally.
There's a positive that came out of this. Is it a great episode? No. Did Judd Pike really understand it? Probably not, but he may not have understood Star Trek in the first place. So, I mean, there was certainly an ending to it. Whether you liked it or not, there was a story and there was an ending. But it kind of shows you that perhaps the sort of word that the studios didn't quite understand or get Star Trek, and a lot of people didn't get it. That they were asking, they wanted a show, but I'm not sure they understood what they were asking for, what they wanted in the first place. So in the end, I think it worked out that the pilot was 2 hours simply, 90 minutes, if you will, simply because we got this, the Q character, because otherwise we may never have had him. So that if there's anything to take away from that, that'd be it. I mean, it's not the greatest pilot for sure, but again, it gave us Q.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think it gave us Star Trek: The Next Generation. It was, whether it was a good episode or not, it was the launching pad for a series that lasted 7 seasons. So, I think it was probably a good idea that he did play hardball with Gene, and then also it kept Gene in the loop, which I think was an important thing because of all of the backlash you were getting from Star Trek fans about it not having Spock and not having Kirk and not having that trifecta of the 3 main leads that Star Trek fans had come to know and love. And without Gene's name attached to that, I think that Star Trek would have fizzled out probably in the first season.
And I totally agree with that. It's the pre-existing franchise thing where if this was generic space show number 47, then would this have really lasted beyond 1 season? It's highly doubtful. Now, of course, there are some problems inherent in it because it was a pre-existing franchise, which was Gene Roddenberry wanting this, CBS Paramount wanting that. But it was also interesting. Look, Jason, you said, look, it brought us Q, but I don't remember who it was that mentioned it in the documentary, but they said those first 2 seasons, they were hectic, they were chaotic, they weren't the best, but they brought us Q, they brought us the Borg, they brought us the holodeck. Those are 3 very cornerstone type situations within Star Trek today. Q is still popping up in Star Trek. In new series. The holodeck is in every series. The Borg, God love them, they just keep coming back, no matter whether we want them or not. So there were still a lot of great things that happened in those first 2 seasons because there were great ideas. It was just the execution that just was all over the map.
Yeah, and that's because there were so many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell who was controlling what at what point. And at some level, I think if they did sell it to Fox, we wouldn't have had Star Trek today. They would have canceled it probably very, very quickly, just because the ratings would have been poor. I think things happened that seemed probably bad at the time when they couldn't sell it to Fox. They couldn't get in the door at NBC. And CBS basically said it was a bad idea or whatever it was. It was just... I think the fact that they went to first run syndication saved it for us, because otherwise no network show would have been able to handle something like that.
Agreed.
Excuse me. You know what I thought was unusual? That this Leonard Maislish character, Gene's lawyer, who was doing all this spying and snooping, allegedly, to all the writers and whatnot, opening drawers. Could you have a more obvious spy than your lawyer? I mean,
that's been somehow banned from the lot and ends up back in there at some point.
Wouldn't you find somebody else to do the spy bidding for you besides the guy that everybody knows works for you? I thought that was interesting. Somebody. It just felt a little. It's like so obvious that he's reporting back, to Gene, and I thought that was hilarious. That everybody's like, Leonard, can I help you? And he's startled because he's digging through your desk. But I thought that was another. Just like, wow, this is the kind of chaos that's going on, right? Because you don't expect somebody snooping on you while you're at work. You're literally there to produce work for everybody. And It's not like it's a secret project outside of the people that are involved with it. So to have that kind of a spy around, is something that's going to be off-putting and definitely change, the air in the room is going to put tension in there and make it uncomfortable. So those were kinds of one of the things that jumped out to me, like, wow, this was actually going on at work. I can only imagine if I go back to my trailer and somebody's like, Rick Berman's lawyer is like looking through my, my trailer drawer. I'm like, what are you doing here?
What are you doing here? Something tells me not much was able to control John Maeslich, and I don't think even Gene Roddenberry could control John Maeslich. It sounded like Leonard.
Yeah.
He was the third Leonard. I was like, how many Leonards are on this show? What is going on?
Sorry.
Yeah, but it seemed like with any good spy character, he was not just serving Gene Roddenberry. It seemed like there was more to it. Who knows if he was returning 99% of the truth back to Gene Roddenberry, or if he was giving his version of what he wanted. Was he rewriting things for himself or for Gene? It's all very muddy and gray there, but it certainly makes us look a little more closely.
Well, to me, it seemed like he had his own agenda, that he wanted to be a writer and that he wanted his scripts in there. And so he was going to find a way to get his voice heard in that writer's room.
Yeah, but he's not a writer, and they had to report him to the guild for violating terms of union laws. It's pretty amazing that this guy was able to continuously sneak onto the lot as well. I mean, usually when you're banned from Paramount, that's you're banned from Paramount, but the fact that he was able to still get on the lot in itself is a mystery.
Dig a tunnel?
I don't know, but I did like that. There was one moment also that I really enjoyed in this documentary was Patrick Stewart saying that he only remembered one planet name in the 7 seasons on that show. He's like, only one planet I can remember. Only one thing jumps out to me, and that's Risa. And I just thought, wow, that's pretty. If you're going to make an impact with the captain, then that's the way to do it. And I think that was Ira's legacy there.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was like, Ira invented Risa. Awesome.
He invented he's got some pretty good fingerprints in Next Generation. He also said that his favorite Risa was Basmati Risa. What do you think?
Oh, gosh. Here it is.
I thought I heard him say that.
Yeah. No, I didn't hear that. I thought another interesting thing was what I did hear Ira say was that making Patrick Stewart a Borg revealed more of his humanness, and I thought that is so. That's actually counterintuitive. So true, you would think, right? It's like making somebody a Borg shows more of their human side. You're like, I guess it does, because it shows a colder version of himself that's even less friendly and and more calculative. But
characters have to have flaws. They have to have depth. They have to have, and these are the kind of things apparently that we will be introduced to in the third season, is characters with depth, with flaws, with a third dimension to them outside of just, the perfect captain, the perfect first officer, the perfect doctor, like the perfect teenager. No teenager's that good.
Totally. And I'm excited to see Michael Pillar's influence in the third season and going forward, because I think, to me, he did bring that stability into the writer's room. That's what it appears to me, because ideas are great and ideals are great, but what matters most is the humanity of the people who bring us these ideas and ideals and how we get there. And none of us are perfect vessels. So it's more relatable to, do it through character.
Yeah. I also enjoyed the whole rationale that Roddenberry gives to the studio execs when he says hair doesn't mean anything in the 24th century. I thought I thought if there's a way that you want to get your way in the show, that is the actual proper usage of using your knowledge of what the world building that you're doing to get your way. If you're going to get your way with the executives, you use that world that you've built as the basis point for your argument. And I thought that's a brilliant way to debate somebody in this particular area. So that's kudos to Gene Roddenberry just for coming up with that as an idea, a way to manipulate the situation.
Hair today, gone tomorrow, he says.
Also was interested in hearing that they had they were considering casting a black man as the captain.
He was a final three.
He was in the final. So just that in itself, I thought was another bit of insight that, I thought lent a lot more from my understanding of what was going on. It was helpful for me to get a visual about the kind of people they were looking for. And I was surprised to see that, the black man was on that very short list.
Same. I was wondering what that might have made Star Trek look like, particularly Deep Space Nine, had Yafet been cast.
That would have been pretty cool. And then Deep Space Nine, then it's like two black captains in a row. They got like a streak going.
But would they have had?
I don't think so.
They might have changed it up. You're right.
Yeah.
I think there wouldn't. Deep Space Nine wouldn't have been constructed in the way that it was had they went with Yafet Koda as the first captain. So I'm happy that they didn't, obviously.
And I think one of them was Mitchell Ryan. What I recognize him. Was that the guy that played Riker's dad? Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
One other point. I mean, they did say that they brought another actor to read with Patrick because they never wanted to bring a single person. I think they may have brought Stephen Mock. I think that's the other guy that I kept hearing before all of this. He was on Deep Space at one point. He was in the trilogy at the beginning of the second season.
Yeah. He
the Bajoran terrorist trilogy. The Circle.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, he was.
I think I'd heard that as well, actually. Guys, we only have a minute left, so I want to be sure. But then we're going to the free for all. Everybody at home, we got way more minutes. Just a minute left of this segment. So many more minutes. So I want to be sure that we give a very special thanks to some very special people, and their names are Homer Frizzell, Dr. Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arucan.
Arucan.
Our pal Titus Mohler, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Tierney C. Dieckmann, Anna Post, Anil O. Polat, Justine Norton-Kertson, Joe Balsarotti, Mike Gu, Dequeue, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Live from Tokyo, The Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Jane Jorgensen, Henry Unger, Allyson Leach-Heid, Julie Manisfee, Marcia Classic Schreier, Greg K. Wickstrom, Jed Thompson, and of course, Dr. Susan V. Gruner and Jason Okun. All right, everybody stick around. We've got the free-for-all up next, and we will be right back on the Seventh Rule. This is fun as hell. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton. This is the free-for-all with Melissa Longo and Jason Okun. Of course, joining us right now are Eve England out in Wales with a really cool ISO linear chip sweatshirt. Mai is live in Tokyo with a pretty awesome sweatshirt herself. Nice necklace. We've got acting ensign Allyson Leach-Heid here. Chris McGee, the Dark Lord. He's got a limerick apparently nowadays. Dr. Marie Segal is in New York. Carrie Schwent probably has the real limerick. Greg Kenzo is here with a rad background. Tierney C. Dieckmann is here dressed for fall. And Gold do Scott Jensen's going to make sure we all sound good. He can't change the dumb words we say, but he can make us sound good.
Could rearrange the words.
Oh, this is fun. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score. Let me pull up IMDb real quick.
Make sure I tend it.
Oh, no, I never guessed an IMDb for a documentary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with an 8-1.
Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know?
I'm going to guess a 7-4 just because I didn't look at the score at all. I didn't even think to for this
Mark
one.
Eaton.
Neither did I.
All right.
7. Yeah.
Whoa.
Around there.
IMDb gives it, or the people voting on IMDb, 7.0. You guys go watch the documentary and give it the rating it deserves.
Yeah.
All right.
Better than that.
I guess we can't do non-appearance mentions today. So we're just going to go all the way to Wales right now for somebody that has been thumbing her nose at the first 2 seasons of The Next Generation, and now she can finally feel validated for the reasons she has given. What did you think of this documentary, Eve England?
Yeah, it's obviously I haven't seen it before, so it was perfect timing. And I do feel validated because it basically sums up exactly what I've been saying for the last 2 seasons. And it certainly makes more sense now. You know, we've always been saying it is just so disjointed. There doesn't seem to be any natural flow. The characters are really weak in terms of how they're portrayed, and particularly their relationships. So I liked how they talked about that at the end, about how we're now at a juncture where they will flip between plot and random storytelling to looking more at the characters of the bridge. So it gave me a lot of confidence going into season 3 that it's going to get much better. But what struck me more than anything is just how on earth did it survive that long with all of that going on in the background? It was insane. I mean, considering that was only an hour, I felt like it was a much longer documentary because I was there was just so much in it, so much detail. I almost feel like I need to go back and watch it again. But it is just, that just sort of sums up the whole experience for me and just makes so much more sense. You know, there's stuff about why people may not have liked Pulaski based on what happened to Gates, and obviously just how the cast must have felt towards her and how generally everyone would have felt watching it. So yeah, so much of it came back from, you know, in terms of all of the things I've been saying, and just made me think, okay, I wasn't just being overly cynical and critical of this, you know, these two seasons. It sounded like everyone who's involved thought exactly the same. So bring on season 3 is what I say. I'm looking forward to it.
And every episode's going to be amazing from here on out, maybe. Mai is live in Tokyo. What do you think of this particular documentary? Was this your first time?
No, I'd seen this a few times. I've got one of those weird people that's got all this stuff on DVD here at home. I don't do any streaming whatsoever. I bought it all. It felt weird to have Shatner narrating. I know it's his thing, but I mean, his overly affected way of speaking is just off-putting to me. It drives me nuts. And the underlying but unstated negative commentary on TNG by a TOS actor, it's just not cool. It comes across as a little bit spiteful to me, I think. That was one takeaway I had. I did like the poker theme they used at the beginning, and then the AHA characters, the cartoon to real life thing that they did throughout. Seeing the younger versions of the TNG cast was fun. They'll always look like that to me in my eyes, in my mind. The one thing that this film didn't address, though, is that Star Trek was largely viewed as trying to play Me Too when TNG came out. The world had just absorbed 3 hugely successful Star Wars films. There was an accompanying sense of an awareness by the public of that world, just as we saw with the world of Tolkien's Middle-earth following the 3 Peter Jackson interpretation films of Lord of the Rings. Even that abysmal creation he made with The Hobbit, it reinforced the Tolkien world image. I imagine that for example, if a remake of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe had come out 3 or 4 years after Lord of the Rings, that the reception would have been maybe similar that we saw here with TNG. So TNG had to overcome a lot. There was bound to be a rough road for them to travel until they owned the broadcast sci-fi world again, like they did with TOS. Personalities, etc., all that stuff went into it. But I think that the writers, being as limited as they were, and the actors not yet having discovered what they would become, went a long way to nearly killing the show completely. Neither Voyager nor DS9 were similarly handicapped, although DS9, being as much of a pioneer as it was, certainly meant that it had a steep hill to climb itself, which it did beyond anybody's expectations. So for me, rather than criticizing the situation as Shatner so indirectly does through the voices of those who felt the daily frustration, I laud the team of actors, the writers, and the studio for riding this out until the wobbles were resolved and they learned how to do things smoothly. I'd retitle the movie The Mountain We Climbed, or something similar positive, but more Trek in phrasing, perhaps. But yeah, I give a lot of credit to the people that are still there from the 3rd year on, because I think they did a lot with it. It's a shame that Denise wasn't there beyond that as a regular role, because I loved what she did and I love her energy. But yeah, overall, TNG had a rough road to go, and they made it through that first 2 years somehow. So bravo to them, I say.
Mm-hmm. The mountain we climbed with a Trek name would be The Ascent for any Deep Space Nine fans. Allyson Leach-Heid, acting ensign, is here. What's up, Allyson? What do you think of this documentary?
I enjoy this documentary. I've seen it many times. I just learned that one of the working titles for it was actually Wacky Doodle. And so, as Maurice Hurley liked to say fairly frequently in the doc, I thought that was kind of cute. This was his only time he actually made a public statement about his time on Star Trek. So I thought that was great that they got it, because he did not survive long after this. He died within about a year. So it was great to get his perspective on it. And I liked getting everyone's perspective, because everyone had their own perspective, and they almost all were parallel. They didn't really go over. And so I enjoyed seeing all the different personalities that were behind the scenes, which really did lead to all the disjointedness of what was going on, because no one had an idea of where they wanted this to go. So it went in so many directions. So yes, it makes me excited that we're starting season 3, because Michael Piller will be there to take the reins and try and get our wagon train to the stars going in one direction and not all of them. So that's what I like about this. And the fact that there were 30 staff and writers fired off in that first year. Yeah, the fact that this show continued and led to all the Star Trek we enjoy now is amazing. So kudos to all of them for putting up with what they did and getting something that was actually enjoyable to watch on our screens. And so I guess I'm thankful, mostly, is what this documentary brings up for me.
Mm-hmm. That first wagon train almost died of dysentery. Right. That's an Oregon Trail joke, everybody. Sorry. Chris McGee is here. He loves Oregon Trail still to this day. What do you think of this documentary?
Play it every single day. So this documentary, I had not seen it before last night. I knew that there was some trouble during the first couple of seasons of the show, especially the Writers Guild strike that caused an abbreviated second season. I had no idea, however, just how much trouble there was until listening to you, Ryan, Jason, and everyone else here with much more knowledge of the behind the scenes goings on. watching this documentary threw a spotlight on those problems and made me aware of even more. Kind of like even Allyson has stated, frankly, I consider it a minor miracle that the show went on to complete its 7-year contractual obligation and to become the highly acclaimed, well-loved, and dare I say, iconic series that we know today. I do agree with of course, this being my first time seeing it, I didn't really see the kind of underlying jealousy maybe or whatever that Shatner was portraying between the lines and so forth. But so I just kind of took this documentary at face value, as I often do. Call me naive. I know I am. When I had first heard of The Next Generation around 1986 or so, I was 11 years old. So naturally, I knew everything. I remember my response to the news was, "That's a stupid title. It's way too long." I may have even said something about it, piggybacking off of the original show's title rather than being its own show. But if I may just hopefully briefly diverge for just a moment and recount a little personal story of mine to the only Star Trek convention I've ever been to. And if I have already mentioned, recounted this before, well, don't stop me. I'm going to go ahead anyway. I never watched the show while it aired. Someone around 1992, just to see what all the fuss was about, I decided to finally start watching the original series. So I rented it episode by episode on VHS tape from my local video rental store. Some of you are probably too young to remember those. Then when I became hooked, I started watching the Next Generation episodes in the same way, renting them, and then later purchasing them at my little local Suncoast video store, again, one by one on VHS. By the time a Star Trek convention actually showed up to my hometown in 1993-ish, I had only seen the first season of Next Generation. So I went to the convention, and I remember being handed a form to select the best 5 or 10 and whatever it was episodes of the Next Generation, because they were going to have a poll and reveal the results towards the end of the convention. Well, I could only rate the ones I had seen, so naturally I picked 5 or 10 from the first season. I can only imagine what those poll takers were thinking when they saw my ballot. The only last thing I'll say here is, of course, my memorable quote of the episode. Everyone knows it. Say it with me. Wacky doodle.
Good stuff. Thanks very much, Chris McGee. I had heard of video stores before my time, though. Dr. Anne-Marie Segal is here. What's up, Dr. Anne-Marie? You've been raving about this documentary for quite some time. Be sure to unmute yourself. What'd you think of it this time?
It's brilliant. Back when I got really into watching Star Trek again, back when it was on Netflix, after I finished all the seasons of all the shows, I was like, wow, because I hadn't finished Deep Space Nine or Voyager and I'd never seen Enterprise. Then I was like, I needed to know more. So I found this, I Googled Star Trek and documentaries and found this. And it just opened my eyes to the behind the scenes, the nonfiction history of Star Trek. And I just since then have not been able to get enough of it. I've listened to every podcast and seen all the documentaries and behind the scenes specials and commentary footage. And it's just there's something so special too about every time somebody pops on the screen, it's oh my God, that's the person behind the name that I read in all the credits when I was learning how to read. And it's just so, I just found it so eye-opening and amazing, and the business of Hollywood. And it just touches on everything and business in general and all these different politics going on. And since it's Thanksgiving, I'm so thankful that we got a season 3 after seeing this.
Yeah. Good stuff. Thank you very much, Doctor, out in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan or something.
Midtown.
I don't know what that means. Carrie Schwent is here. What is up, Carrie? Scott's trying to coach me. Thanks, Scott.
It's in the middle of the town.
I guess that makes sense. Carrie, what did you think of this documentary? And is it your first time seeing it?
Yeah, it was. I heard the name, but never got around to watching it. I very much enjoyed all of the animation as they're describing situations. I thought that was a very, very nice way of showing us what happened without, having CC camera footage or however they would do it. I'm kind of with my Aunt Shatner. Having heard him speak on the cruise a handful of times, I don't really enjoy listening to him talk a lot personally, but frankly, listening to him is kind of like listening to my father-in-law ramble from like one story to another. But that said, my husband and I both thought that he did a pretty decent job in this particular documentary. One nitpick I have about it, though, Jonathan Frakes, somebody should have told him to take that gum out of his mouth if you're going to be talking on camera. I could see it in his teeth. I'm like, spit out the gum, Jonathan. Come on, you're on camera. You can put the gum back in when you're done. But it was fun. Maurice Hurley, he's that kind of like grouchy adorable. He's like both kind of adorable and grouchy kind of at the same time. And I, like everybody else, enjoyed the wacky doodle, and it set my poetry wheels turning. So I have a limerick for you all to enjoy. Some say Gene was a wackadoodle. They also say his lawyer was rude. The beginning was rocky. Some scripts end up choppy. His involvement, however, was crucial. Yes, like I have said before, without him, none of us are sitting here talking about a documentary right now. And in honor of Thanksgiving, we can thank him for that.
Good stuff. Thank you so much, Carrie Schwent. All right, Greg Kenzo's here. He likes to have cool backgrounds. What did you think of this particular documentary? And was it your first time watching it? Cool shirt, too.
Thank you. Yeah, this was my first time watching it. I thought it was great. At first, Maurice Hurley was kind of pissing me off. Like, in kind of some of the things he was saying about Gene and the series in itself being like the series is so established now that we can look back on what he was saying, and maybe he was giving his own perspective. I mean, he was giving his own perspective, but yeah, he was kind of pissing me off. He redeemed himself by saying something like, let me see. Well, I understood the tough position he was in because he had to basically keep Gene's vision, right? And like adhere to it. And I don't know if that vision is like super clear, because honestly, when I think of a utopia, and I know Earth is a utopia in Star Trek during that century, is it still a utopia if other planets in this galactic society are not? You know what I mean? I mean, Earth can still be a utopia, but the universe that they created is not, right? And so, yeah, I know that's other writers coming in and like making changes to Gene's initial vision, but yeah, I thought it was great. Brandon Braga, his perspective, like keeping Gene's vision alive in a utopian society. But then I also agree with Ira, who kind of has like an opposite vision. So it's weird. I'm on the fence between both, because Ira took it all the dark perspectives. It's really just human nature, but kind of exaggerates them, and the writing I think is better for it. But you know, this documentary is great. I had no idea these things were happening. I'm new to Star Trek, so yeah, I knew the two first seasons of the first 2 seasons of TNG were not that great because I'd seen them once before. I was like, okay, the show is getting better. But I had no idea this was going on behind the scenes. Yeah. All in all, it ended well. I think it had a good message. And, yeah.
You had a good message too, Greg. Thank you very much for that. Tierney C. Dieckmann is here as well. What do you think of this documentary? This one seems like it's right up your alley, in fact. Was it your first time?
It was actually. I'm not even sure if I had heard of this before, which really surprised me. So I am very glad that Anne-Marie had been up on getting us to do this. It was a pleasure to watch. Only watched it through once. I think this is one I'll revisit a number of times in the future, and I'd like to because it went by super quickly. It just like ended out of the blue, and I'm like, wait, there's got to be more.
Tierney, there's an extended version of all of these interviews as well in the Captain's Collection, which can be found at shoutfactory.com or amazon.com. Check it out. There's way extended stuff. Please continue.
Good. There should be, because there is a lot there. There is a lot there. And my God, I thought that I have an overbearing personality. Some of the people behind this, and you get all of those strong personalities together, and it is miraculous what they did. And they, as Maya had said, you climb up that mountain, and they stuck it out, and look what we got out of it. And they kept going, they kept fighting, lots of fighting in various ways. And a lot of it, I agree with Greg, a lot of it pissed me off. I won't go into specifics exactly, but I'm sitting there just with my head in my like, Jesus, these people, showbiz, hooray. But and at first, I realized that it was going to be narrated by Shatner. Like, this could go a number of ways, but he had a decent amount of humility for it. And I really loved that Ira, good old Ira, just straight up asked him the question that I've always kind of wondered about. How did you feel when you heard that TNG was coming out? And they both handled that rather gracefully, just that twinge that he felt. I'm sure there was quite more than a twinge. But it reminded me of my uncle, who is probably the only other big Trekkie in the family. And he grew up with the original series and had those similar feelings of, what the hell are you doing? And just then you come to love it. And actually, Eve, it reminded my husband and I, we were talking about you when you first started watching, and we were a couple episodes into the first season. And I can't verbatim remember what you said, but it's something along the lines of, I don't get why anyone likes Picard. And
rude.
But she was right. Like, it was terrible. He was arrogant and rigid and unrelenting. And then you hear them going on about how he remembers a meeting one way and Pike remembered it a different way. And it's just all of these intense personalities coming together, and we still got something great out of it. And I loved learning that Tracy Torme, who at first I wondered, is he related to Mel Torme? He's his son. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Which just made me think of Night Court. But he wrote Conspiracy and a number of other episodes, but my favorite episode, gotta love that gore. And then he went on to write Sliders, which was great. And he had a great idea to bring in a doctor before we got Pulaski, after Gates had temporarily left, to have a character, the doctor that had, I don't know if she was, or it, whichever, was supposed to be an alien or not, but have complete honesty, just straight across the board. And they had rejected that, but I wondered if some of that had kind of filtered through Pulaski's character, because she had some brashness with her, which I always appreciated, of just, I don't always agree with you, which isn't necessarily, well, we won't go into that side of things now and how that relates to nowadays, but just you listen to her, damn. And I thought she was great in that role, but some good, some bad, and you learn some things, and some of it's knowledge passed down. But there were some things that made me a bit sad, learning a bit more about Roddenberry's deterioration, and you could sense some of that as he got older, some of his ailing health. I always wondered, about what someone would consider his health today, as we learn more about mental health and how to take care of it, and how he would be treated, or how he might be able to treat himself in today's time. But it was different then. You handled it differently, and he had Majel, who kind of seemed to hold him together a lot. And what would be if he didn't have all these people, if he didn't have I can't pronounce his name properly, but the lawyer who didn't like it. Yes, I didn't like learning about him from facts on each episode beforehand, but I definitely don't. That was enough. That was more than enough to learn about him now. But just people like that, are people quite that bad still around in showbiz now? Do they still get away with that, or is that just a sign of the times? But either way, it was a great documentary, and I'm very glad to have watched it now, and would definitely go on to learn more about with the extended cuts. And I'd like more of these kind of deep dives into the background information. I feel like we don't get as much of that, or maybe it's out there somewhere in the YouTube verse, but not as much as it seemed like we used to. There was always like, we could watch something we enjoyed, and then we'd come across the making of it, and we'd see all the practical effects in the background, and you'd see those making of things that would pop on TV, and they aren't there anymore. We don't learn because we expect it all to be CG, or we can Google it, or we can see their IMDb pages. So you don't get quite as much of the deep info. So this was nice. This was good. This is a good choice, and I am glad to have watched it, and we'll recommend it, and we'll watch it again. Thumbs up.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Tierney C. Dieckmann. Goldu Scott Jensen is here wearing an awesome Be Kind shirt, by the way, everybody. That's good stuff. Chase Masterson. Which version is that?
That's Ken's from Vegas.
Kenneth Mitchell, our favorite.
There it is.
So what did you think of this here documentary, Scott?
Well, this was also the first time that I'd seen this, and it always had kind of been like on cue for me. Like, it was like, I'm going to watch that one next, because obviously I loved all the other documentaries that they've put out. Like, every single one of them that I've seen, I've absolutely loved. Looking forward to the next and the next and the next. But I am a big fan of documentaries as a whole. I like a lot of like punk documentaries, or like American Hardcore, and then there's Exit Through the Gift Shop, which is great. And then there's tons of different documentaries. But the thread that I really enjoy between all the different genres and subjects that they're about is just unflinching honesty. And this really had a lot of unflinching honesty in it. And I think that's really important when you've got a story that has got not but one person's side and the other person's side, but like 30 sides. And a lot of times I feel like in this community, we do deify Gene Roddenberry a whole lot. And I think that it's very cool to me to see that he is so human, that he was so human. And that to me is the same thing that I get out of like Deep Space Nine, how these characters are so human. I respect them more. And instead of somebody that's up on a pedestal that, I could never relate to. I feel like these stories that were in here, which I had heard a lot of it probably from Dr. Trek, but lots of these stories just throughout the years. But it was really cool to see it, played out chronologically in order. And I love the comic art, of course. It was absolutely wonderful. I'd like to look up and see who did all that, because that is some solid work, a lot of solid movements. But yeah, as a whole, I definitely do like this a lot. I'm going to be purchasing this one as well, like with What We Leave Behind and stuff like that, which is up over here. It was good seeing Ira again on there too. Of course,
yes,
unflinching honesty in Ira Stephen Bear is going to go hand in hand. He was actually pretty chill in this from what we've seen, so it was laid back a little bit. But yeah, definitely loved it. I'm definitely going to see it again.
Good stuff.
Oh, and I also, I'm sorry everybody else, but I love William Shatner, and he could say whatever he wants and be as abrasive as he wants, and I'm going to love it. Love it, love it. And I love the little William Shatner next to Ryan right now. It's my favorite.
Oh, hey, there he is. He just likes to hang out. What did you say? Unflinching honesty, or as Chris McGee reminds us, absolute candor. Good stuff from Picard. Any final thoughts, Cirroc, Melissa, and or Jason Okun?
I'll go. I was thinking the same thing that Scott mentioned, is how this documentary deified Gene Roddenberry, and I like that too. And it kind of gave me an insight into maybe where his brain was when he created Star Trek, and learning about his background, being in the military and what have you, and then being the police. I did a little reading, but after the military, it got me thinking that might be the catalyst for this idealism in the 24th century, to break out of this world that we live in, where there's so much chaos in this world, that he wanted something better for humanity. And I don't think that's wackadoodle at all. And I think it's quite the opposite. And I think that he should be lauded for going after that and sticking to that ideal. But at the same time, I can appreciate that he is a human being, and he was battling his own demons, and that he made mistakes just as much as any of us do. So I appreciate a lot of what I learned in this documentary. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I see this sort of as a peek behind the curtain that we don't often see. And there's certainly a lot of breadcrumbs that were thrown into this documentary. And I think it certainly bears watching and rewatching. And I've seen it a number of times. And certainly if anybody wants to learn more about this, there's more information out there. And some of this stuff sort of keeps coming up as you watch the shows or listen to other people talk. I mean, we've mentioned that, Maurice Hurley, you don't really get to sort of his point of view or from him personally almost anywhere else. I think the same thing probably goes for Diana Muldaur. You don't often see her, or hear her talk about this. There are very few sources there. And once you move to the executive side, you see John Pike, and you see these sort of power games that you don't, you kind of hear about this a little bit, but you don't often kind of see the players themselves talk about that. And there's certainly egos involved. And that, if you like to see how the sausage is made, this is really something that is quite meaty, if you will, and something you do want to see and hear. And it is hard to put a lot of this into 1 hour running time, but a lot of it got packed. And whether you like the narration by Bill Shatner or not, I think it was pretty well done. The way it was all put together, and really is very informative. So I think it's certainly an hour well spent.
Yeah, and I have a few takeaways. One was that, Michael Okuda was in this episode, and I thought he's always this eternal optimist. Every time I see him, he has this positive aura about him, and he's always looking like a kid who's fascinated with the universe and the exploration and all of this thing. And he's almost like the real life Will Wheaton on the show. So that's one thing I want to give kudos to Michael Okuda. And the other thing is, I saw that Patrick Stewart was the serious one on this show, always kind of, tamping down on the set, having too much fun, and Frank's trying to dance and sing, and he didn't want to have any of that, which is funny because you always hear that about Deep Space Nine and Avery, but we see that it started out a lot with Patrick Stewart as well, because when you take your work serious, you take your work serious. So that's one thing that also stood out to me. The other thing I want to do is I want to defend Denise Crosby, who I felt was unfairly taking a few shots were taking at her in this documentary by the executive John Pike. Yes. I didn't think it was necessary for him to say she's no Katharine Hepburn. I didn't think it was necessary for him to say she went on for her motion picture career and in that kind of way that he was saying, in a condescending way. It just was inappropriate for him to take shots at Denise Crosby, especially this many years later. So I just thought it was very inappropriate. The other point I want to make is, this is the studios. This is the biggest studio in Hollywood, and they can't visualize Patrick Stewart with a toupee on. Like, they have to fly one in and everything. Like, this, seriously, you guys do all the special effects. You can turn a guy into a chimpanzee, into a dinosaur, but like, just visualizing putting hair on this guy, I was like, no, we don't know what it's going to look like. We have to fly it in. Like, seriously, that's like, come on, guys. That's that was a little disappointing for me for the studios to have very little imagination in that department. And my final takeaway is that this Leonard Meislish lawyer for Gene might have been the beginnings of the Ferengi, because I could see a lot of what he was doing, trying to get some inside information. He created a whole other, a race of people with his shenanigans and
Well, so like Cliff Bowl and the Bolians.
Yeah.
Maybe he wrote him.
I would say, who knows? Right? He might have wrote him. So those are a few of my takeaways. I did like the way they mentioned about having to dry out Gene Roddenberry over there at the rehab facility, and I thought that was just a nice, soft and gentle terminology. But overall, I really enjoyed this documentary. I think it gave me a lot of insight. Really was happy to see Diana Muldaur in this as well. And I also, from that little brief interaction with Shatner, felt like she felt more of a kinship to Shatner than she does to the Next Generation cast. That's what my little takeaway was from that moment. And other than that, I really enjoyed it. Could have been a little bit longer for me.
Yeah, definitely. And luckily, they've got the extended versions in the Captain's collection that you can get, as mentioned earlier. I think I might check that out too, because they had to really condense it into something extremely fast-paced and frenetic. But everybody, we've got to go. If you're a patron, check out Things Left Unsaid. We'll be talking all about that stuff in just a moment, probably. Or we might talk about cheeseburgers or something. But thank you very much to Melissa Longo, Jason Okun, Chris Wacky Doodle McGee, Allyson Leach-Heid, My Live in Tokyo, Eve England out in Wales, Dr. Anne-Marie Segal, Carrie Schwent, Greg Kenzo, Tierney C. Dieckmann, Gull Duscat Jensen, for myself, Cirroc, Melissa, and Mr. Aaron Eisenberg. Thank you all for joining us. And until next time, always remember the 7th rule.